So when you were going through high school and stepping into like that recruitment realm, how are you trying to present yourself, not so much branding wise, but like character wise? How are you trying to present yourself in order to attain those better results and then all of a sudden acquire or get collegiate coaches to kind of like pursue you because they saw your style on the mat, but then you also carried yourself in a specific manner. You're a very charismatic person and you go out there and you try to go for the big moves. Like you're not just trying to tie up and pity patter around. You're aggressive. You're out there. You're controlling the ties. You're creating big movement. You're getting big takedowns. You're showing up when it matters. And that completely embraced that character that you had out on the mat. So when you're looking for those college coaches or looking to take it to the next level, what do you think your big value add was as an athlete to get those college coaches involved with you?
Yeah, so I honestly don't think that I got as many looks as I should have, and it's partially that the biggest thing is just exposure. My family doesn't have a lot of money. We've never had a lot of money. So I didn't get to go to all these big tournaments because we just didn't have the money to pay for the hotel, the entry fee, the food, the travel, all this stuff. So I rarely went to these big tournaments in high school. And then locally, I'm dominating the scene except for every single year my coach said, "You're going to go Yanni's weight and you're going to beat him this year." And every single year except for my junior year, I went Yanni's weight. So 7th, 8th, ninth, 10th in my senior year, I was in Yanni's weight. Now in 7th, 8th grade, there was guys that were better than Yanni because we were both still just babies, wrestling these high school kids who were, some of them are already done with puberty in our weight class, seniors at 96 pounds. We had a 96-pound weight class in New York, but it's like we were wrestling all of these years. You know what I mean? And he was always there. In 7th grade, he was in 6th grade, so he wasn't in my weight, but we were still wrestling in these tournaments outside of school. 8th grade, he was in my weight. He placed higher than me at the state qualifier. He didn't go to states. He was a 7th grader. I was an 8th grader. Freshman year, I wrestled him in the finals of state qualifiers. I didn't get to go. I'd beaten guys that placed at states that year, but I didn't get the wild card points to go to states. My sophomore year, I lose to him in the finals of state qualifiers. I go to states. I place 4th. My junior year, I went a different weight, won the state qualifier for the first time ever, went to states, took 4th. And then my senior year, I wrestled him in the finals of counties, sectionals, state qualifiers, and the state semis.
Oof.
And my senior year, that tournament, my state tournament my senior year was the best I ever wrestled. I bonus pointed my way through the tournament except for Yanni, and I lost to him in the semis, and I had multiple coaches come up to me and said, "Dude, I honestly believe that if it was anybody else in the country, it could have been number 2 in the country. You probably win that match with the way you wrestled." I got to his legs a ton of times. I was wrestling super hard. I got on bottom, but it was just like every time I was shooting, he was scoring on me. But looking back, I was wrestling really, really great at the time. And then it was just kind of too late. You know what I mean? I made a huge jump from my junior to senior year. And I didn't have the exposure because I'm behind Yanni, who's number 1 in the country, but I'm also not wrestling number 2 through 20 ever. I never got to wrestle those guys because I didn't go to these big tournaments. And my senior year, after I'm already committed to Binghamton, I go to the Virginia Beach Duels. I go undefeated. I beat a guy who placed at Fargo. I dominated. I got a major decision on a guy who placed at Fargo that year, and he was like 14th in the country. But it was like too late. You know what I mean? I had already been committed and I was already going off to college. So because I didn't really get that national exposure, I don't think that coaches thought I was as good as I was, except for the few coaches who really did believe in me, which was, Cornell was a little bit, but my ego didn't allow me to think to go there because I knew I was in the backseat to Yanni still because he was going to Cornell. And I wanted to be the guy, you know what I mean? I wanted to be the guy that coaches were putting all their eggs in the basket. So 2 schools were Binghamton and Buffalo, and I ended up choosing Binghamton. And honestly, was a great decision. But yeah, that's when I started getting college coaches on my radar. Was like my junior year at States, and then my senior year. Really, that's where I jumped levels.
That's awesome. So when you were going through that transition, It seemed like your coach, the mindset that he wanted was you to never benchmark yourself against like that top guy in your weight was Yanni. All right. He's like, I want you to go right into the mix, smack this kid right in the mug, and persevere forward and take this kid out as much as possible. And by not benchmarking yourself, you were able to acquire greater result because of that. And because that started to transpire, you got those looks. You were going against you stepped in that weight class every single time and showed up against the number one kid in the country every single time for how many seasons since seventh grade all the way to senior year, same
Yeah.
weight class.
Mm-hmm.
Although you came short, you were also able to acquire that exposure that you needed from a college coach because they saw you putting that effort in and trying to overcome a monster obstacle like that with the number one kid in the country. So when you started transitioning your way, you got recruited, you ended up committing to Binghamton. And when you showed up at Binghamton, what were some of those mindset switches that you had to have in order to step your game up a little bit more? Because the transition from middle school to high school is huge. And then high school to college is monstrous as well. And it's a huge time management adjustment, athletic performance adjustment, as well as a personal adjustment too, because you're all on your own. You don't have that support system, that core group of guys like your coaches and your team that are always in that corner. You're going to have to differentiate yourself and figure a lot of stuff out on your own. So what were the things that you had to figure out on your own to step your game up to that next level? Because freshman year of college, you had some pretty solid results and you were able to jump some levels really, really quickly in that collegiate realm. What did you do?
Yeah, so the biggest things with college was when I first got to college, I do believe that I loved the sport of wrestling more than anybody else on that team. I'll stand by that till the day I die. There's people who love wrestling as much as me, but nobody that I've wrestled with on any of my high school or college teams love wrestling more than me. So I just wanted to be good at wrestling. And now I have all the best dudes from New York. I have a coach who is a two-time All-American. My coach, Coach Dernlin, coached at Penn State. He was the head coach when I first got there. So now I have the exposure to these super high-level partners and coaches, and I love it. So I'm just soaking everything up, like jumping insane levels my freshman year. And I started as a true freshman, and I beat some good guys. I lost to some guys. But in terms of the wrestling, I was doing all the right things to get better at wrestling. One of the biggest things was my assistant coach, Kyle Borshoff. Shout out Kyle Borshoff. I ended up transferring from Binghamton, and I had my issues with that, and I'll talk about that. But I was wrestling with Kyle, and my first college open was at the Bearcat Open. I wrestled this kid, Hunter Ladner from Harvard. I think he graduated high school at he was top 5 in the country in high school. So I'm sitting there shitting bricks because my senior year I wasn't ranked anything because the only dude I'm wrestling is Yanni and he's whooped my ass, so I don't have any other exposure. So I'm thinking like, oh, this guy's way better than me. He was number 5. I wasn't ranked. It's my first college tournament, so how much better could I have gotten? And I go out there and I lose to this dude by 14 points. And my coach Borshoff, he came up to me, he starts cursing me out. He was like, "You motherfucker, you don't even understand how good you are, and you just let that person beat you who's way fucking worse than you." He goes, "I know how you wrestle me. We go back and forth in the room, and I would fuck that kid up." He said, "I would have tortured that fucking kid that just beat you by 14 points, and you go back and forth with me." He's like, "How the fuck are you going to let that happen?" He goes, "You're really fucking good. I'm an All-American, and you get takedowns on me. You get out on me. You get turns on me. We're going back and forth. We're battling. If you can do that, you should fucking run through these tournaments. That doesn't have a single All-American in the bracket." And it was like that moment a light bulb went off, and I just started beating countless guys who would have, quote unquote, smashed me in high school in terms of national ranking and accolades and all of these things. And I continued that through my freshman year. I ended up getting a serious injury in my knee and my ankle. I tore both of them at the same time. But earlier in the year when we did wrestle-offs, it was me and 2 other guys. One was another freshman. The other one was Frankie Garcia. Shout out Frankie. He's an awesome dude. I wrestled the freshman. I win by major. He ends up transferring right away. He leaves and goes to Muhlenberg University. That's my buddy Dylan Schwartz. And then the day of the wrestle-off for 149, but the plan was for me to redshirt no matter what happened in the wrestle-off. The day of the wrestle-off for 149, the other 149-pounder, Frankie, quits. 30 minutes before the wrestle off, walks in the coach's office, says, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done." So now I'm the only 49 pounder on the team. So I just get thrown in the starting lineup by way of, hey, we don't even have any other options. And wrestle the whole season, take seventh at conference. And then that summer, I end up wrestling this guy, Sam Crevis. He was a 3-time Super 32 champ, number one in the country for 3 years, super stud out of PA. And I was wrestling him in a freestyle dual meet tournament, and I teched him in the first period off like 3 takedowns and 2 turns. And then I'm like, that was the real moment where I was like, wait a minute. High school does not fucking matter. Nothing that happened matters. All that matters is how good are you as a wrestler versus how good is he as a wrestler right now. And that just carried me through. It elevated my wrestling to a crazy level. I still didn't get the results I should have got, but it was not wrestling related. I'll say that.
So you had this crazy perspective shift. It went from you wrestling guys who were nationally ranked in the country to those guys wrestling you. It was switching that perspective around. It was like, I'm not here to show up against their skills and have them and you submit down to their capabilities. It was like they're stepping across the mat and then they're confronting your skills. You're the dude with the work ethic. You're the dude with the power. You're the dude with the capabilities to achieve all. And this dude is coming across the mat and is trying to take something away from you. Because you switch your mind to that, you were able to persevere forward and acquire some sick results. That's badass, dude. So when you were going through that collegiate career, you obviously made this transfer. You went from Binghamton, had a solid career there. Those coaches there helped align your perspective or shift your perspective to become an absolute badass of an athlete. Although you weren't acquiring the results you wanted, you were able to evolve as a wrestler big time. Because in high school, your coach was trying not to benchmark you against the number one guy. And then when you came to college, it seemed like you idolized some of these guys. And because you idolized them so much, it kind of like made you had to go out and compete against them. Then once you made that switch and those coaches helped you make that switch, you pushed forward, persevered fast, and were able to acquire those results.